All right, here's what we want to talk about today. A brother carriage that has the two center buttons. I just can't tell you how many times I get an email, those two center buttons won't move independently, or they won't move at all. Now let me just show you, if you take the button assembly off, this can be purchased. This is the assembly itself with the buttons. But now look what we have underneath here. Here is the slide assembly that is actually those two buttons. And this is one hooked up on a carriage. Now this is what we're going to look at today that's very different. I've had to take this one completely apart. And so this is what we're going to look at. I'm going to remove this screw right here in the center. And it's not tight because I just had it finger tight in there. Now these are the two plates. Now I've had people say, I saw this metal piece sticking through the button slide, and you can see that that would be this slot right here. And maybe they're not meant to operate independently. Well, if there's two buttons, if there are two buttons, then they're supposed to be two different movements.
There are, in fact, though, models without two buttons.
Right. I call this 6 buttons because there's 2 in the middle and 4 on either side. There is a 5-button machine where there's a one solid button in the middle. Okay, here's what I'm saying is, if there's 2 buttons in the middle, there have to be 2 operations that they do. Here's a machine that's an older machine, and look, 5 buttons. There's no separation in the center button. So there's only one function for that button. But now here's what we're going to do. How many times have I heard someone say, just use a hairdryer and they'll go to working again?
Oh, 1 million, 2 million.
Couple of million, okay. But that was rhetorical.
Oh.
Here's what we're going to discuss. That would work, and what we say around here, if you have to get orphans out of a burning building, you take whatever shortcut you have to. But to actually fix the problem, this is what I want you to see. Look at these 2 pieces. Look at the distance between them.
There is no distance.
There is no distance. I'm going to slide it, and you can see they slide on one another. That's what they function as. The top one slides on the bottom one.
Can I make a guess in knitter talk, not mechanic talk, about what happens when the buttons stick?
Yes.
The old grease is hardened and has glued them together, and it will briefly unharden if you heat it up. Thus, the hairdryer trick seems to work. However, the minute it cools back down, it'll gum up worse than ever, now having been heated and even nastier than it was.
Right. Now, let me show you the principle. These are clean. They've been siliconed, but you'll notice they're sticking together. That one's pivoting, but look, it's not really attached. See the mark that is made when they slide between one another right there? This is how they're supposed to work. You can see there's a little glistening sheen on that one.
From your silicone?
From the silicone. But now, if they're stuck, you see what happens. If the grease is sticking them, you're right. You warm it up, and the grease will let them slide. But you're right. The minute it cools back to room temperature, that old grease is going to make it hard.
I can think of another problem. When you heat it up, you don't have any control over where it goes on the inside. So it may drip into something else that wasn't previously gummed up.
Yes, here's another point that I want to point out. Look right here. This is the spacer. I'm going to put it on the end of the stylus. That's the spacer that goes beneath the screw in between the legs of your stitch size guide right here. If you turn the dial, and we'll turn this around, make sure they can see, but if you turn the dial, it's actually moving this post, and it's moving it closer. It
slides it closer or farther.
Or farther away from the dial center. But you see that little spacer right there? That is the critical distance that the screw goes into. I bet it's stuck to the magnet. No, there it is right there. I'm going to try to hold this screw where you can see it. There's the threads of the screw right here. And then there's that thick body of the screw. That thick body of the screw is what distances these slides. right in there. This is where it lives when they're in place. So we're talking about these two pieces that are surface to surface sitting on this piece, which is also surface to surface. So you have 3 layers of metal, and there's really no allowable distance between them, and then your stitch guide is sitting on the plate. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of metal with no appreciable distance between
So
them.
they need to be clean, smooth, free of rust, free of any impediment whatsoever. If fiber got in there, normally it doesn't, but if it did,
Right.
that would be an
You can
issue.
see while I'm moving the button slides back and forth on the button assembly, you can see they've got plenty of room. And I will show you the slot they go into is that nice wide area that I'm putting the stylus into right here. But look at the thin spot below them. I'm going to open the pin so it'll go in there for us. But look at this little thin spot right here. That is what these two together ride in. So again, if there's anything in there, extra grease, extra fiber, anything but a couple of silicon molecules, and that's what it's going to continue.
I'm going to
do.
hypothesize that the tight fit is actually one reason the Brother carriage is such a good performer. It doesn't rattle or clack. It does the same thing every time.
Well, when you think about there's one movement, this slide goes in, this slide comes out, both slides go in, both slides come out. That's a very finite movement. Look at the size of this return spring. They're tiny. Here's the return spring for the actual lower slide right here, that silver spring.
Mm-hmm.
It attaches right here. It's a very tiny movement. It doesn't need to be much of a movement. So, see, this is its spot. This is where it lives, and that's its movement right there. So all it needs is a little bit of lubrication. And now here's what I want to show you on this assembled carriage. You can spray all of those assemblies right in here with the silicone. So if you had your carriage just turned upside down and you sprayed right in here, and then you operated your buttons, squeaky, 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 squeaky. Look at what we got. See?
We can't see a thing. Come towards us. There we go.
See what's moving when I move those buttons? Now that's the lubrication that they need. I don't know if you can see the
However,
shadow
lubricating that, it may temporarily loosen it up, temporarily.
Right.
However, if there's yellow grease gumming it up, it's not a solution. The grease has to come out. The old gunky grease.
Let me see if my parked carriage has some
Gunky grease.
gunky grease and greasy grimy
I think you've cleaned it pretty well.
that we can look at pretty good. But here, I just pulled this slide off,
And underneath is
and
some.
underneath you can see an outline, look, of where the grease moved around, and it's actually sticky to my finger. But you can see a print.
And
There's a good view right there.
That's old lithium grease that is not turned yellow. It's not nasty.
No,
but
it's not. But let me get my screwdriver, and I will show you that is nothing but the grease making the pattern because it's moved around where that plate sat, bolted down to the
So
machine.
to summarize, the point you're making is if those buttons stick, it's signifying that it's time for a good deep cleaning, and we have other videos on that.
That is exactly right, but we very seldom require or ask that a customer would go down this far into the carriage. So you're never going to see
Why it's such an issue.
what actually lives underneath the button assembly.